Bom bom. Hello, right, me again, obviously. So I did that last video in reply to the long comment on the website, and I get the idea I was a bit harsh in the end, because obviously there's nothing much to disagree with everything that was written, but I get the idea I was a bit harsh. I'm going to read this letter in the comment section of this morning's Guardian about the strikes in France to edge me into my continuation and hopefully not justify some of the things I said, which might have seemed a bit harsh, but soften them slightly maybe, because I want to use the word realistic again. Everybody has to be realistic. It's easy to be idealistic, but when things change, realistic is more realistic. Okay, reasonably long comment, but it does get back to the difference between the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and now. So, quick background, Macron is president of France, voted in to come and do some Margaret Thatcher work on the great French workers. And you'll see it's all to do with fairness. Polls run in the left, centre and right-wing newspapers in France, and all show overwhelming support for Macron by the French public with regards to the changes he will make to the SNCF, Société Nationale de Chemin de Fer, the railways. People in the private sector, builders, electricians, plumbers, etc., now see their retirement age at 67. You need to have worked 41 years to get a full state pension in France. That's 6 years more than in the UK. The SNCF, EDF, Électricité de France, and La Poste workers can retire at 50 if their work is physical, on a full pension, and 55 if they are admin staff. Not only do they get to retire, but they get loads of perks which are not taxed. EDF workers get 80% discount on their Eleki bills, and after working for 5 years this discount is for life. SNCF get free European rail travel for themselves and direct family. La Poste get super mutual insurance which allows them access to the best hospitals in France for free. The facteur, the postman or woman, suffer very bad shoulder and elbow strains from leaning out of their vans delivering the post apparently, and many need replacement elbow and shoulder joints. EDF, La Poste and SNCF also own holiday villages all over France, including some of the more prestigious holiday resorts, where they benefit from all-inclusive holidays as at stupidly low prices, typically €150 a week for a person. All this comes at a cost and is paid for by the taxpayer and the users. Just the taxpayer. It represents a big chunk of the current deficit for each of these institutions. This is why the general public in France support Macron in this. Why should they? This is the fairness. This is humans, individuals, all wanting fairness. Why should they have to work? Why should they have to work every hour God sends until they're 67 and get a shit pension, when the guy who sweeps the station platform, because he's an outside manual worker, be able to retire on 50 on full pay and still keep his perks, including cheap holidays, etc. Right. Hopefully from that you've got we've got a bit of a crossover. And the important thing is individual people, individual fairness. You can say it's used and abused and manipulated by them up there, and it is, but it's there to be used and abused and manipulated. Okay, where am I going? Okay. Yesterday, I think I mentioned that caveman brain was the equivalent of your brain, my brain, teenage brain, modern teenage brain. They just... I won't do an analogy. What's the point? It's just a fact. That's history. It's using the same brain, but it's just had different inputs. It was always a Ferrari, but in the old days they used to just hide behind it when a mammoth came to kill them. And then they developed the idea that you could open it and keep your vegetables in it. You get the idea. The different things can be done with the same brain. Right, I've forgotten how I was going to get into... Okay, I was going to carry on with what I think's happened between the 50s, 60s and now. And unfortunately, I think it has something to do with something called Say's law, which is economics. And I think most people know that I don't really have much truck with economics. And this law sounds a bit wacky to start with. It states that, Say's law states that production causes its own demand. There's an expression, do something and they will come, build it and they will come, whatever it is. Okay, there are other ones like, well, it's Say's law anyway. Basically, get something nice and shiny, put it on the shelves, people will see it and buy it. You've produced it, and by producing it, you've created demand for it, and it'll sell. And if you overproduce it, then you put lots of them on the shelves at a lower price, and they'll sell. I don't know if that's part of Say's law, because I don't look up economist things. And I think this is what's come to pass between the 50s and 60s now. There was something... Okay, let's hop back to cavemen and the Ferrari brain that we've got now. Cavemen and Ferrari brain couldn't do much. Sticks and stones broke bones, but that was all. More recent history, the Industrial Revolution, coal power, linked with the Ferrari brain, did a lot. Recent history, Ferrari brain linked to oil power, an awful lot. Our individual ideas could explode. But what we certainly can say is that we got not the Industrial Revolution in the 50s. We had a manufacturing explosion, a manufacturing renaissance, manufacturing different. They did it different ways. They used to. They just turned it into factories that just pump shit out. Okay, that's more the way to say it. That's what they did. They had factories that just pump shit out. And whether they knew that they were using Say's law or not, I don't know. I very much doubt it. Anybody that believes in economic law is an absolute moron. But they pumped it out, these new things, all these factories pumping out these new things, and they came on all our shelves in the 60s and 70s, and people went berserk. and bought them. And I believe it's that got us to where we are now. It's not something that I can directly thingy, but I'll give you a vague idea that it's not a normal way. It's the money view of it. There was a rise, as mentioned in the EDF, SNCF, National Health Service, even wages were all going up. British Leyland wages were going up. And we could afford more of this shit. The bank manager being your friend and having your interests at heart was starting to break down. What was already happening then, which was really clicked and enormously magnified by Thatcher's Big Bang deregulation of money. Don't forget, even in the 50s and 60s, when you went on your first Spanish holiday, you had to register how much money you were taking out of the country. It's that was the deregulation of money, when money then could swash all across the world. Up until that deregulation, it was bloody tight. But in the 50s and 60s, it started loosening up after the restrictions coming off the Second World War. For American people, your restrictions came off very quickly. In the United Kingdom, they came off very slowly and really didn't come off until the 60s. And basically what happened is that directly or indirectly, more money was being lent out by your friendly bank manager for mortgages and loans and all sorts of directly or indirectly hire purchase to get television or washing machine or whatever it might be. Lots of things were being bought on tick. It was one of the first explosions of bringing sales forward by borrowing. Borrowing, there should be another economic law. Borrowing engenders. Borrowing engenders more borrowing. And it generally always comes from the banks. The banks were just, whether they were ordered to or just did because it was more profitable, or they felt more confident that because money was circulating so much more, because the blue-collar people were getting more wages, more things were being bought, everything was looking quite, not good, but certainly better than it was after the Second World War. So they, having your best interests at heart, were lending more money. There was more money, which obviously was ultimately going to lead to the inflation of the late 70s and early 80s. But for this moment, it was making everything possible. Everybody could have more wages. Everybody could have more things. Everybody, I won't say were happier, but it wasn't going too badly because there was more money. I didn't want to go back to economic type things, so I'll go pretty quickly. You can just see the inevitable result of this. Yes, when there's more money being lent out and people taking on more debt, more things are bought. Purchases are brought forward. But then this is a very mild example of a Ponzi scheme. It's got to stop somewhere. And you've got your business cycles and whatever. But basically, it's that loosening of money re-loosening of money, more loosening of money, more loosening of money, even more loosening of money, which has got us to where we are now. The banks could have supported tightening money again, but why do it? It's more likely, basically, that they're paid back if they loosen. And that's where we are now. And in between, natural things have happened, like advertising, selling people all sorts of things that they can do with all this more money. Do I have to say more than, and that's where we are now? Just about anything that you want to think of can just be, look at what I just said and go, yeah, okay. It's just like that. A wedge. Go like that. Tight after the Second World War. And it's just got to be looser and looser and looser, because that's the natural progression of things. Money has got to be looser and looser and looser. And obviously over the last 15, 20 years, it's been mortgages, which pumps out money in the hundreds of thousands, which makes it even looser. And something's going to have to be invented up here, the near future, to make even more money be pumped out, to just keep all this going. The repayments that everybody now knows that everyone's got, because everyone reads the newspapers or everyone looks at their own financial situation and realizes how much money they owe here, there and everywhere. And the numbers are frightening, and it's obviously not people, just the people, it's the government as well. Everybody is deeply and weeply in debt. And it's this that causes everything. That you can imagine the people in the 50s and 60s taking companies giving out. It's too late now. You can just imagine everything, can't you? Is there anything you can't imagine? Pensions being given out because the good times are rolling? Of course good times roll when money is lent to you. Somebody lends you a couple of hundred, good times roll. Until you have to pay it back. And then you have to borrow a couple of thousand. And that's, to my mind, that's the simplest and easiest way of explaining where we are now with everything. That the rich floating above this and the poor being crushed by it. It's not the people's fault, it's this system's fault of getting into a groove where you've got to pump out more and more money every year. And this is why I keep saying over and over again, for all these things, the whole looking at money thing has got to be looked at and changed somewhere along the line. Or, as you say, there will be violence. Or, well, there just can't be. Well, you've got the idea now. It's all based on this money shit. And all... I'll see you in the next video. Looks like another 3 video day. Okay, see you soon.